Hi, I'm Laura Flanders. Drawing sex workers, drawing prisoners, drawing blood. This week on the Laura Flanders Show, graphic journalist Molly Crabapple joins me, and I have a few words to say on the very dark magic arts of the art market. That's all coming up. Stay tuned. Our next guest creates beautiful art and powerful journalism. Molly Crabapple has drawn in Guantanamo Bay, Abu Dhabi's migrant labor camps, and with rebels in Syria. Her memoir, Drawing Blood, was just released in December. She's a contributing editor for Vice and has written for publications including the New York Times, the Paris Review, and Vanity Fair. Her work is in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art. Molly, welcome to the program.
I'm so honored to be here.
Well, we're really happy to have you too. It's quite a journey from school dropout to a permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art.
Though I have to say, there is something about having a protest poster in the Museum of Modern Art that feels like, I don't know, a butterfly pinned dead to a wall.
Well, we can get into that. But first, you have a lot of truth-telling that goes on in this book. You describe your childhood as something you would have liked to set a match to and burn up. Were there stories that you find it hard to tell?
The thing that I find hardest about a memoir is that it's not just your life, it's other people's lives. Every time you write, it feels like a betrayal of the memory of others. I think the hardest thing for me was fact-checking it and going over all my past emails, speaking to my past friends, realizing what a jerk I had been at various moments. That, even more than reliving any sort of past pain, the idea of doing others wrong was the hardest part about it.
At the age of 12, you say you were diagnosed with opposition-defiant disorder, which I think turned out to be very important in your life. So I want you to speak to some other 12-year-old out there who maybe is being told she has the same condition. How important and useful has it been to you?
Oppositional defiant disorder is just another way of saying you were born to be a journalist, as far as I'm concerned. It means that you have no natural respect for authority. And God, shouldn't that be the human condition, right?
Agreed. In terms of your process, though, it has been a fascinating story. Your life really changed in 2007, 2008 with the financial crisis and Occupy. But before that, you supported yourself in lots of different ways. One of them was you found yourself working in what you call naked girl work. Naked girl work. And you write beautifully about both the sort of societal attitudes towards that kind of work and the way that you came to grips with it, made peace with it. Talk a bit about that story.
I worked as a rather low-end naked model, the kind of legal end of the sex industry, I would call it. I would pose for amateur photographers, but the job was really a lot more like being a sort of private stripper where the camera was their excuse. Mm-hmm. The camera was their way of seeing themselves as, an elevated and artistic gentleman. This was the only way that I could see as a 19-year-old with no real skills to make $100 an hour. Yeah. It was the only way to escape the grind that, consumes so many people, the grind of going to an exhausting, low-paid job, getting home too tired to do your art, and then repeating it over and over again until you've, given 20 years to something else that you never wanted to do. It was sometimes dangerous work, I would say, because whenever you work in the sex industry, even in the legal end, you've given up, your good white girl privilege. Right. You've given up any notion that society is going to protect you. But by the same token, I would rather burn that sort of false patriarchal privilege and get to live life on my own terms than I would, cling to that sort of idea.
Yeah, and yet at the very same time, you're figuring out, you're right about talking about drawing as objectifying. You are looking, you are paying attention, you're drawing, but you're also an object for other people looking.
Yes, yes.
How did you think about that?
I think that working on all aspects of your field is the best thing to do, right? You have so many journalists, for instance, who might cover the police beat, but they've never been arrested in their life. Right. You have so many journalists who cover the smuggling routes in Europe now, but they would never have been smuggled. Yeah. If you don't know both sides, I don't think that you can speak truly about them. And also, art is always objectifying, even the best art, and I don't even mean that in a bad way. There's been so much talk about the male gaze in art, but very often I think it's just the artist's gaze, and that we think of it as the male gaze because women were banned from looking.
So tell me more about that. What do you mean?
Well, the idea that you have the right to see someone else, the right to take them and reduce them to a two-dimensional object that's yours, that's a reinterpretation of them, the right to break down all the lines of their face and the lines of their personality, that's something historically only men have had the right to do. You know, in the Renaissance, women were banned from drawing nude models. Women were kept from doing so many aspects of visual art. I mean, kept by laws, kept by institutions. And so they weren't allowed to have that gaze. And so it got seen as, you know, something that only men had, but in reality it's just something humans have.
Do you say somewhere in there that glamour was originally a word for witchcraft?
Exactly, yes.
That was news to me.
No, glamour historically was a spell that you would put on something that made it look like something other than it was. So you could take this book and put a glamour on it and make it look like it was gold, and then someone would spend lots of money on it, get it home, and realize it was just paper.
Well, to illustrate the point that you just made, you did do a report for Vice on police harassment of sex workers. Let's take a quick look. Do you want to set it up at all? We'll play a clip.
Of course, I'd love that.
You want to talk a little bit about what went into it, then we'll take a little look at it?
Last winter, I spent a lot of time in the Bronx and in Brooklyn researching these things called human trafficking intervention courts. These are courts where women who are arrested for sex work are put through that are supposed to offer, you know, social services. But the thing is, they're quite an ironic thing because the arrests are still the same. These are still arrests, very often of trans women, almost entirely of Black and Latino women. There are some Chinese immigrant women as well that are brutal, that often involve sexual abuse by the police or verbal harassment or money being stolen, that are often not based on any actual sex work being done, but just sort of on racist or transphobic profiling, that involve women being handcuffed, being locked in a cage. And then after these women go through this incredibly traumatic and degrading thing, then they're hauled before a court and a judge says, "Oh, we're going to fix you. We're going to assign you to 5 weeks of counseling. We're here to help."
That should do it.
Yeah, that should do it. The courts are ridiculous for sex workers, obviously. They're also ridiculous for trafficking victims because you'd think if you were someone who was trafficked, the first thing you might need, right, might be emergency housing to get away from your trafficker. You might need a source of income. You might need help with immigration. You might need protection from your trafficker. And these things are not on offer from the court. All that's on offer from the court is 5 or 6 sessions of counseling.
Let's take a look.
On May 2013, Monica Jones, a student and LGBT activist at Arizona State University, was arrested for manifesting prostitution. Monica said she just accepted an undercover officer's offer of a ride home from her favorite bar. Monica is among tens of thousands of people arrested every year for prostitution-related offenses. According to the FBI, police arrested over 57,000 people on such charges in 2011. The vast majority were women. Monica wasn't arrested for exchanging sex for money. According to the Phoenix Municipal Code, you can be arrested for manifesting, like Monica was, if you wave at a passerby, start conversations, or even just ask if someone is a cop. This doesn't just happen in Arizona. Manifesting statutes exist all over the country. In January 2013, New York police arrested Felicia McGinnis for talking to 3 people within the span of 20 minutes and for wearing jeans that outlined her legs. With the manifesting charge, racial profiling is epidemic. In Brooklyn, Black women make up 94% of those charged. In addition, trans women like Monica are routinely profiled as sex workers. Police sometimes place fake ads on websites where sex workers find clients. Then, they arrest the sex workers when they show up. Worse, some police departments allow cops to misrepresent themselves as clients to convince the sex workers to sleep with them. After sex, those cops make arrests. This might seem like sexual assault, but some police say they have to deceive women into sex to prove that a crime occurred. A prostitution arrest can follow you for life, whether or not you're convicted. In many cities, people arrested as prostitutes have their mugshots and names posted online. Some police departments even turn prostitution stings into reality TV. The police department in Hillsborough, Florida, let TV crews film officers arresting sex workers for the show Cops. Prostitution is a misdemeanor in most states, but fighting charges is risky and time-consuming. Many defendants plead guilty just to get the whole process over with. But each time they plead guilty, it builds their rap sheets. In many states, a third prostitution conviction is a felony, with a prison sentence in months or years.
Thanks to Vice and Fusion for that reporting. You did another video on solitary confinement. Let's take a look at that.
In July 2013, 30,000 state prisoners went on hunger strike in California. The strike lasted for 2 months. It was the second one since 2011. The prisoners were protesting solitary confinement, what many people consider to be a form of torture. In solitary, your world is a gray concrete box. You spend between 22 and 24 hours a day alone in your cell. Your bed is a concrete slab with a thin mattress. 3 times a week, guards shackle you and take you to the showers for 15 minutes. For exercise, you pace around another concrete box. Sometimes a bit of ceiling is uncovered. This is the only time you'll see the sky. As a punishment, the use of solitary confinement is often an arbitrary decision. Nearly 3,000 people are held in Pelican Bay State Prison in Crescent City, California. Over a third are in solitary, most of them because of quote-unquote gang affiliation. But that's a meaningless phrase. Gang affiliation might mean reading a book by a Black Panther, or drawing Aztec patterns, or even having a tattoo. But Pelican Bay isn't alone in this. Around the country, you can land in solitary for your art, your reading, your beliefs, your gender status, your sexual orientation, or your friends. Women have ended up in solitary after reporting being raped by guards. Transgender prisoners are often put in solitary just for being trans. Prisons say this is for their protection. There is no limit to how long someone can be held in solitary confinement, and very little evidence is needed to justify holding a person in solitary indefinitely. At Pelican Bay, hundreds of people have spent over a decade inside. According to the UN, 15 days in solitary confinement is torture that can cause permanent psychological damage. William Blake, who's been in solitary in a prison in New York State since 1988, said, "Dying couldn't take but a short time if you or the state were to kill me. In SHU, I have died 1,000 internal deaths."
We'll put more information and links at our website. We've also played some of your work around mass incarceration that accompanied the interview that we did with Brian Stevenson. Amazing work. But this isn't what you were doing 10 years ago.
No, 10 years ago, I was part of the burlesque and nightlife scene.
In the most exaggerated moment, well, one of the most exaggerated moments of that scene that we've seen in maybe a century, 2007, 2008. Tell us a little bit about your life at the box.
In 2007, when I was 24 years old, I got the job as the staff artist for the box. This meant that most nights I was sitting on the steps of what at the time was the iconic nightclub of the New York's boom years, and I was drawing. And the box was a very interesting place because it was both a celebration and a condemnation at once. It was like class war in the form of a nightclub. It was a place where the guys that were destroying our economy would blow through $10,000 a night on champagne, but it was also a place where all my broke performers' friends would do acts that were elaborate and cruel mockeries of them. So it was like Weimar Berlin. It was all that tension and angst and desire all fueled into one place. I was obsessed with it. And I found that what I learned drawing there about power, but also drawing really fast in the dark, would serve me very, very well for journalism later.
You write in the book about the relationship between bodies and money. And it reminded me of an interview we did recently with Zilla Eisenstein, the feminist, who talked about the relationship between capital and bodies. Bodies, labor, make wealth. Therefore, the wealth has a race and a gender, and we shouldn't pretend that it doesn't. You talked about how in that moment people thought they had freed capital from all of that, any relationship to bodies, and yet here they are in this kind of...
The celebration of the body. Well, that was the delusion, right? That we could take all of the dirty factory work parts of capitalism and stick them in China somewhere and not have to look at them. And here we could deal with some sort of economy, some sort of capitalism of pure math. And oh, what a lie that was.
2007 totally changed all that. For you, for your work, all of it. How so?
It was actually a moment in 2010 that changed everything. I was in London, and I was doing murals for the Boxes Club in London. It's a construction site, covered in dust. You're working alongside construction workers, but because of weird class things, you're considered to be somehow better than them, even though you're all just working on a building together. And outside London was rioting.
Right.
At that time, the Tories and the Lib Dems were trying to pass through these brutal, brutal tuition raises that would have basically basically destroyed one of the main roots of class mobility in Britain, right? The idea that university would be affordable, and students were not having it. Students were taking to the streets. They were protesting. They smashed up the headquarters at Millbank, which is beautiful. They were making their voices heard in the most creative ways and at great, great personal risk. And there I was, balanced on a ladder, painting a nightclub all day. And it was this real moment where I thought, which side am I on? What am I doing? And at the same time, that was the time that I met the journalist Rory, who really helped inspire me to go into journalism.
It's a beautiful story, and that work that you did then, and we should say Rory was a regular correspondent for this program in those years. That work brought you into Occupy. From Occupy, you end up going to Guantanamo, Syria. We just did a piece with Laurie Anderson not so long ago, where she, in an art collaboration with a former Guantanamo detainee, telepresenced in Mohammed al-Gharani, who was one of the youngest detainees. And I was so struck by how much Americans who visited the show wanted to communicate with him, they wanted to close the distance. And you write about that too. How did go in there affect you? It was traumatizing, obviously, but you talk about that distance closing.
I went to Guantanamo twice in 2013, one to document the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed hearings, and the next time to be on their Potemkin tour of the prison. Yeah. Guantanamo is an atrocity, but it's the most American sort of atrocity. Everything you're there, and I think this is why it was so traumatic for you, if you're American, will remind you of its Americanness. This is a place that is running an extrajudicial prison that tortured hundreds of people, that also has a gift shop and a karaoke bar and a sense of profound self-satisfaction. This is a place where guards guard the entrance of the prison next to a sign where they can rate their spiritual health from 1 to 5. It is cheerful. It is self-satisfied. It is profoundly ignorant about the rest of the world. It's obsessed with the security and feels itself constantly victimized. It is American. I was doing a profile the first time on this young French Algerian man named Nabil Hajareb, who was picked up in Afghanistan and held without charges for 13 years. He had been tortured. At that time, he was hunger striking and being force-fed, which is a brutal, demeaning, and extremely painful procedure. And when he was finally released, even though he had been in France since he was an infant, he was just chucked out in Algeria one day with no apologies after they had attempted to pressure him to sign something that he was a terrorist all along, which is what they do to everyone. And when he was let out, after a few weeks, he wrote to me. He wrote to me on Gmail, and he wrote this witty, optimistic letter about sort of what he hoped for his life, about how much he had enjoyed my article. And it just struck me, look, these are these people that we've so dehumanized. I mean, they put hoods over their head, right? They try to censor what their faces look like. They want to make these people into boogeymen in orange jumpsuits, into blanks that we could project everything on. And here he was, and he was just a guy.
Mm-hmm. And now you're collaborating with refugees or people who don't want to be refugees in Syria. What were you hearing from them this fall as the attacks on Paris played out?
I'm terrified for my friends who are Syrian. I'm terrified that these attacks, which were deliberately designed by ISIS to convince Europe to shut their doors to refugees, I'm terrified that these attacks will lead to further restriction of their freedom of movement and further immiseration for them. It's an incredibly frightening time. And I mean, I just want to say, I mourn those attacks on Beirut and on Paris. And I have friends in both cities. It's a horrifying thing that this group is murdering people. And I think that as the world decides how to deal with that, what they have to avoid doing is they have to avoid giving into what that group wants. What ISIS wants is to make the world shut its doors to refugees. It wants to, in their words, reduce the gray zone, they call it, where Muslims can live in the West. And the more that a country becomes intolerant, the more that it closes its borders, the more they're giving ISIS what it wants.
Right, the more they're winning. We don't have a lot more time, but I want to encourage young women in particular to read this book, and to try to express how powerful it is what you've written here. not only do you describe crossing all sorts of borders that you were never supposed to cross as the young woman that you were coming up, but you've also taken on, in a very courageous way, speaking, drawing, speaking when perhaps drawing was the thing you were trained to do and you felt anxious about speaking. This is a beautifully written book.
Thank you so much. 2 years of my life.
What gave you the courage to do it? Who inspires you? And what's your message maybe to those young women out there who think, oh, I could never do that?
What would I say to young women? I would say that if you're a young woman, the world wants to divide you into things. It wants to say you can be sexy, or you can be serious, you can be smart, or you can be pretty, you can be loved, or you can have a career, but you can't do both. What the world fears the most is it fears female muchness, which is so different from having it all, right? No, they fear being it all. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that, we have only one life, and that life is far too short to cut off pieces of ourselves. It's far too short to limit ourselves based on, the dictate of some boss or some rule or some silly thing that was never meant for your benefit anyway. So I just want to tell women to develop every aspect of themselves, including the jagged bits and the complicated bits, and to be who they are. Mm.
You've also taken a position on the Palestinian boycott, the cultural boycott. Pat just put in a video about it. Why won't you be going to Palestine and Israel? Why is that important to you?
Well, I will be continuing to go to Palestine for journalism, but the reason that I won't be working with Israeli cultural institutions, I don't believe in a state based on racial discrimination. That's why, and I think that BDS is a peaceful, nonviolent, and very effective tactic that's been called for by Palestinian civil society.
Boycott, divestment, and sanctions.
And I can't support a state that's fundamentally based on racism.
So you won't be going with the book, though. I guess what I was
Oh
thinking.
no, I
won't
won't be doing a book tour in Israel. No.
Molly, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The market is magic, say capitalism's admirers, but some of that magic is pretty dark. Just look at what it's done to art and the art market. What once inspired generosity now feeds off its opposite, inequality, and there's no reason art buyers or sellers should ever want to turn it back. I thought about this reading Molly Crabapple's bold, passionate new book, Drawing Blood. Pens can't take on swords, she says, let alone predator drones. But the best art can inspire generosity. To make her point, Crabapple tells a story about Picasso. In 1937, when Picasso's Guernica was shown, it was heroic, not just for its heart-rending depiction of civilians slain in the government's bombardment of the Spanish Civil War, but in the effects of the Guernica exhibition itself. To get in 1937, the price viewers had to pay was a pair of boots to be sent to the Spanish front. The gallery gathered 15,000 pairs. Fast forward to today, and the prime effect of the high-end art market is to encourage hoarding. Take one Picasso. In 1997, the price paid for a Picasso at auction was almost $32 million. In 2015, the price paid for the same Picasso was $179 million, also at auction. The price soared because there were that many more bidders this time around. As the New York Times Upshot columnist explained, the number of people who could easily afford to pay $179 million for a Picasso had increased more than fourfold in less than 2 decades. Those same decades had seen all but the very top fall further and further behind. The top 1% pulled away from the 99, the top 0.1 and 0.01% from all the rest. If wealth's concentrated at the top, there's less of it to spread around. The bombs hitting regular civilians these days in places like Greece and Spain are financial, not ferrous metal, but austerity is today's civil war. The market discourages generosity. All that wealth is purely relational, of course. Once it's a commodity, art's value is measured in the price somebody is willing to pay for it. And that means the $179 million buyer, if he ever wants to sell at a profit, is banking on the top fraction pulling even further ahead of the rest. So there you have it, from giving to boots to giving the poor the boot in not quite a century. Welcome to the dark magic of the art market.